I didn't wake up because of a sound. I woke up because something inside me said I shouldn't be asleep anymore. That deep, instinctive pull in your chest. The kind that doesn't come from logic or noise, but from the quiet realization that something has changed around you. The air feels different. The silence feels heavier, like the world shifted while you weren't looking. At the time, I didn't understand it. I just knew my eyes snapped open, my heart already moving faster than it should. Earlier that night, I'd been in the middle of a long road trip across several states. I was driving west to meet up with my family and a couple of friends, and instead of pushing straight through, I booked a small cabin for one night. The plan was simple. Arrive late, eat something quick, shower, sleep for a few hours, and get back on the road early in the morning. Nothing complicated, nothing risky. By the time I pulled in, I'd already been driving for close to 9 hours. My body felt heavy, my eyes burned, and my thoughts were slow. I just wanted a bed. What I didn't expect was how isolated the place actually was. Maybe it only felt that way because it was deep into the night and surrounded by forest. But the cabin wasn't part of a cluster or a small rental area like I'd imagined. There were no neighboring lights, no other buildings, no visible road traffic. It stood alone in the woods, a single structure swallowed by darkness. I parked on the gravel directly in front of it and stepped out into the cold night air. The silence felt thick, the kind that presses against your ears when there's absolutely nothing moving nearby. One thing immediately caught my attention: the front door. It didn't match the cabin at all. The building itself looked old, weathered wood, rough edges, a worn, rustic feel. But the door was modern and heavy, almost industrial. Solid metal frame, reinforced hinges. It looked like something you'd install after a problem, not during the original build. At the time, I brushed it off as a strange design choice and didn't think much of it. Inside, the cabin was basically one single room, a bed pushed against one wall, a small kitchenette tucked into the corner, a couch and TV squeezed into the remaining space. Everything felt cramped but cozy in a dated, old-fashioned way. I didn't waste time settling in. I threw together a quick meal, ate standing up, showered, and collapsed onto the bed. Exhaustion hit me almost instantly. My body shut down before my brain had a chance to overthink anything. Sleep came fast. Too fast. Because what felt like only an hour later, my eyes snapped open again. No noise, no movement. Just that same uneasy sensation crawling through my chest. I lay there for a moment, listening. The cabin was silent. No wind rattling the walls, no distant animal calls, no footsteps, nothing. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. I slowly turned my head toward the window beside the bed and pulled the curtain back slightly. At first, all I saw was darkness, then movement. Something shifted between the trees. It took my eyes a few seconds to adjust and focus, but the way it moved told me it wasn't an animal. The shape was wrong. The motion was deliberate, upright, controlled. A person, out there, in pitch-black forest. There was no moonlight filtering through the branches, no stars illuminating the ground. The woods swallowed everything beyond a few faint outlines of tree trunks. I could barely track the figure as it moved deeper into the darkness, and within about 30 seconds, it vanished completely. I stayed at the window, waiting. Nothing came back into view. After several minutes of staring into nothingness, I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was someone hiking late. Maybe a hunter. Maybe my tired brain was exaggerating shadows. Tomorrow was going to be another long drive. I forced myself to lie back down. But sleep didn't come. I lay there with my eyes closed for what felt like 40 minutes, my thoughts drifting in restless circles, when suddenly, a sound outside. Before I could even register what it was, a loud knock slammed against the door. The door was only a few feet from the bed. There was nowhere else in the cabin to retreat to. No hallway, no second room, no back exit. My body jolted upright. Adrenaline flooded my system so fast it made my hands shake. Another knock hit the door, harder. Then a man's voice exploded through the thin walls. "Open up!" His tone was sharp, commanding, angry. "Open the door, now!" My heart hammered in my ears. "I know you're in there," he shouted. "Open the fucking door!" Every instinct in my body screamed that this wasn't normal. This wasn't someone asking for help. This wasn't a lost traveler. This was aggression. I stood frozen for half a second, unsure whether to speak, hide, or run, even though there was nowhere to run. My car was parked directly outside. Anyone could tell someone was inside. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The call struggled to connect. The signal was weak, cutting in and out as the phone tried desperately to latch onto data. Those seconds felt endless. Finally, the line connected. The operator told me an officer was on the way. The man outside kept slamming into the door. I couldn't tell if he was just hitting it or actively trying to break through it. The heavy door held. Then, suddenly, the pounding stopped. Footsteps moved away from the porch. For a brief second, I felt a fragile wave of relief. And then, glass shattered. The sound came from outside, unmistakably from my car. My stomach dropped. I stayed frozen in place, barely breathing, listening to the aftermath of the glass breaking. The night swallowed everything again. No footsteps, no shouting, no movement I could track from inside the cabin, just silence pressing against the walls. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me, telling me to stay inside, keep the door locked, and avoid looking outside if I could help it. My eyes kept drifting toward the window anyway, half expecting to see a shadow move past the glass. Nothing. Every second stretched unbearably slow. When the red and blue lights finally washed over the trees outside, I felt my body almost collapse from the release of tension. I could hear gravel crunch beneath tires as the patrol car pulled in. The officer knocked, calmly this time, announcing himself before I unlocked the door. Cold night air rushed into the cabin as I stepped outside for the first time since the knocking had started. My car window was shattered exactly where I'd heard the sound. Glass littered the ground beside the driver's door, glittering faintly under the patrol lights. The interior had been rummaged through, glove box open, center console flipped, random items scattered on the seats. The man was gone. The officer followed the disturbed tracks leading away from the cabin and into the tree line. It was obvious whoever had done this had fled back into the woods, but there was no way anyone was going to chase someone into pitch-black forest in the middle of the night. Backup arrived. They took my statement. They photographed the damage. They swept the immediate area and found nothing else. Eventually, they contacted the owner of the cabin. That's when things started to feel even stranger. The owner hesitated at first, his voice tight and uneasy, before admitting that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened at that cabin. A previous guest had experienced a similar incident. Someone pounding on the door late at night, yelling aggressively. That guest had left early the next morning without calling the police. When the owner arrived later that day to clean the cabin, he found the front door badly damaged, splintered, bent, like someone had tried to force it open with heavy tools. Instead of reporting it, he replaced the door quietly, with a stronger one, a heavier one, the same door that had just protected me. He admitted he was afraid that if word got out, no one would ever rent the place again. Hearing that made my stomach twist. That meant whoever had been outside my cabin that night may have done this before. It wasn't random. It wasn't a one-time outburst. Someone knew this place. Someone targeted it. By the time everything wrapped up, dawn was creeping into the sky. I packed what little I had brought with me and left immediately. I didn't care about sleep anymore. I just wanted distance between myself and that stretch of woods. The road felt endless as I drove away, my hands still tight on the steering wheel. Even now, years later, I still think about that night. What would have happened if the door hadn't been reinforced? What that man actually wanted when he was screaming for me to open it? Whether he was just desperate or something much worse. I don't know if I could have done more. filed more reports, pushed harder for answers. At the time, all I cared about was getting away and seeing people I trusted again. But one thought has never left me. Whatever that man came to the cabin to do, I'm not sure I was meant to walk away from it. Next story. People always say the graveyard shift is boring. Too quiet, too slow, too empty. I used to think that was a blessing. Until one night when I realized that quiet doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes it just means no one will hear you scream. I worked at a gas station from 2018 through 2020. It wasn't a dream job by any stretch, but it paid the bills. From the beginning, I begged my manager to put me on overnight shifts. Less customers, less chaos. Mostly just me, the hum of the refrigerators, and the buzzing fluorescent lights. Eventually, during my second year, he finally started giving me overnights regularly. And I was right. The work was easy. But I hadn't realized how painfully boring it would be. After 10 p.m., the station was practically dead. Sometimes a car would pull up for gas, but most people didn't even come inside. Whole hours would pass without a single customer stepping through the door. There were nights when I literally had nothing to do, so I'd find ways to kill time. Reorganizing shelves that didn't need organizing, cleaning already clean counters. Sometimes I'd even step outside and walk laps around the empty parking lot just to feel like a human being again. That night started exactly the same. By midnight, I was already restless and desperate for something, anything, to occupy my brain. I decided to empty the trash cans by the gas pumps. At least it would give me 5 minutes of movement. I grabbed a few trash bags and headed outside, dumping the first couple of bins and then walking around the back of the building toward the dumpster. I tossed the first bag in and nearly jumped out of my skin. A man was standing directly behind the dumpster. I hadn't seen him when I walked up. "Jesus. Sorry, I didn't see you there," I blurted out, half embarrassed, half still trying to process the jump scare. He didn't respond. He just stared at me. Not curious, not annoyed, not confused, just blank, empty. Like someone had turned off whatever made him human. The silence stretched for a second too long. I forced an awkward smile and walked back toward the front of the station, trying to brush it off. But the more I thought about it, the stranger it felt. Why was someone standing behind the building near the dumpsters at midnight? He didn't look homeless. His clothes weren't dirty or torn. He didn't look drunk either. He looked deliberate, like he was waiting for something. I glanced back a few times while finishing the rest of the trash. When I cautiously returned to the dumpster with the last bag, the man was gone. No footsteps, no movement, just empty darkness behind the building. I threw the bag away and went back inside, telling myself I was overthinking it. There were late-night shops nearby, even a bar down the block. People cut through the area all the time. Maybe he was just taking a shortcut. Maybe he was a drunk wandering around. I checked the time. 12:15 a.m. I leaned against the counter, trying to find another pointless task to occupy my brain. That's when I saw something move. Just a flicker in the corner of my vision. I looked toward the doorway that led into the back room. Nothing obvious. I told myself I was tired. Seeing things. It happens when you stare at the same walls for hours. Still, boredom won out over logic, and I figured I might as well check. I walked slowly toward the doorway, leaning my head slightly to peek around the corner as I approached. The lights in the back room were off, and someone was standing there, pressed tight against the wall, barely visible in the darkness, like they were hiding. Waiting. My stomach dropped. Before I could even react, the figure stepped forward. It was him, the same man from behind the dumpster. But now I could see his face clearly, and it was burned into my memory instantly. His expression wasn't neutral anymore. It was twisted, wild, a mixture of rage and something unhinged, like he wasn't fully connected to reality. I barely had time to register the knife in his hand before he swung it toward me. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I jumped backward, slamming into one of the shelves behind me, knocking items loose. And then I ran. I bolted straight out of the store and didn't stop until I was halfway down the street. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. It was foggy that night, thick enough that I couldn't see clearly back toward the station. I had no idea if he was still inside or if he was already gone. By the time the police arrived, the man had vanished. No sign of him anywhere. My best guess is that he really was homeless despite appearances. Maybe mentally unstable, maybe desperate, maybe looking for an easy victim and whatever cash or supplies he could grab. Or maybe he was just completely unhinged and wanted to hurt someone that night. Either way, I never found out. I quit not long after that, and I never worked another overnight shift again. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing about quiet places is how easy it is for someone to disappear inside them. Next story. I didn't think anything was wrong that night. Nothing felt strange. Nothing felt off. Nothing warned me that I was about to come within a few feet of someone who shouldn't have been inside my house. It was one of those quiet nights where time just drifts by without meaning. I was sitting on the couch, half watching whatever was playing on TV, letting the long weekend stretch out in front of me. No plans, no responsibilities, just background noise and a cold beer in my hand. I lived alone in a regular suburban house. Nothing special, nothing fancy. A few months earlier, I'd gone through a rough breakup and decided to keep the house instead of selling it. It still felt strange sometimes, being alone in a place that used to hold two people. But that night, the emptiness felt comfortable. Safe. It was somewhere between 10 and 11 when the sound happened. A sharp knock, not from the front door, behind me, somewhere deeper in the house. At first, my brain didn't even register danger, just confusion. A knock made no sense at this hour, and it definitely didn't make sense coming from the back of the house. I left the TV on and walked toward the sound, listening carefully. It almost sounded like someone tapping on a window. That didn't feel right. I checked the family room, then the kitchen. Nothing was out of place. No movement, no shadows, no obvious explanation. I shrugged it off and went back to the couch. I wasn't exactly known for being overly cautious, and a couple beers in probably didn't help my judgment. I told myself it was nothing. Something shifting, maybe an old house sound, maybe a branch brushing against the siding. A few minutes passed. Then it happened again. Tap, tap, clear this time. Definitely a window. My stomach tightened slightly as I stood up again and walked toward the back rooms. That's when I noticed it. One of the windows in the back room was open, and so was the basement door. Both. Cold air drifted through the hallway, brushing against my skin. If it had been just one or the other, I might have convinced myself I'd forgotten to close it earlier. But both being open, combined with the tapping sound, made the situation impossible to ignore. Someone had been inside my house. I know now how stupid my next decision was. But in the moment, alcohol, ego, and adrenaline mixed into a terrible combination. I was a big guy, stubborn, and not about to let someone break into my home and disappear without consequence. I stared down the dark basement stairwell. It was silent, too silent. I took a few careful steps down the creaking stairs and flicked on the dim basement light. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floors, exposed beams, cluttered corners filled with shadows. The weak light barely touched the far edges of the room. It felt like stepping into a blind spot. That's when real fear hit me. Every dark corner suddenly looked like a hiding place. My heartbeat slammed against my chest. The alcohol buzz vanished instantly, replaced by sharp, cold awareness. I didn't go any further. I backed up the stairs quickly, shut the basement door, and dragged the nearest heavy piece of furniture in front of it as a barricade. Then I called the police. By pure luck, an officer happened to already be in the neighborhood. He arrived fast, flashlight in one hand, gun drawn in the other, and immediately headed down into the basement. It took him less than 10 seconds. He found a man crouched in a dark corner right near the bottom of the stairs. Close. Way too close. I had been no more than 3 or 4 feet away from him when I'd gone down there. The man was armed with a large kitchen knife. Thankfully, he didn't resist when the officer confronted him. He surrendered quietly and was taken into custody without a fight. Later, the explanation made even less sense. The man claimed he'd broken in just to get shelter from the weather, even though the weather was mild and clear. He wasn't homeless. He had his own apartment downtown. He had a regular job. There was no real reason for him to be inside my house. That night came closer to ending my life than I ever want to admit. Not because of some long chain of bad decisions, but because of a random, silent coincidence that almost put me face to face with a knife in the dark. It taught me something I'll never forget. Danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly in the shadows, just a few feet away, while you're sitting on the couch thinking nothing in the world could possibly be wrong.